wild. Hello, everyone. Welcome to, hold on, let me switch this. Hey, y'all, this is, we figuring it all out. Welcome to episode 11 of Daring Discussions. It's me, your girl, Broaddus-Smith, the #1 Christian sexologist and your favorite girlfriend. This episode is the concluding episode of our series on what makes me a sexual being. And this is the sexualization episode. The cat, y'all already know Bruce. Katie, come get Bruce, please. This is the concluding episode of, listen, we are live. Anything can happen. This is a concluding episode of the Circles of Sexuality series. This is the sexualization series. And I felt it was important to join you live to have this discussion because of the intimate nature of the conversation. I wanted to be able to connect with you all and have such a serious conversation in real time without what can be considered the sterileness of, a heavily edited episode. So that's why we are going live today. We are live on YouTube. We are live on Instagram. I hope I got it all set up right, which is why I got my phone so I could check and make sure I done did it right? Set up right, which is why there we go. We're good there. We are good on YouTube. Let's go on to check and see if we are good on Instagram. I don't know. Are we good on Instagram? Can you see me? Let me know if you can see me on, I don't know. But either way, let's jump right into it. You already know what our favorite segment is. That is As For Me in My House. And so for the As For Me in My House segment, for those who are just now joining us and aren't familiar, As For Me in My segment are the real life scenarios that have been emailed in or DM'd in or sent in or just asking me in passing, and people wanting to have my insight of what they think about certain situations. So this week will be no different, even though we're live. So y'all will be able to get it clear and cut. I just want y'all to know that the nerves are through the roof. I know I do this all the time, but I be nervous. Anyway, As For Me in My House. Hey, girlfriend. Hey. I have been married for 5 years, and sometimes I feel like when it's time for sex, I just go along to get along to avoid conflict or disappointment. Now, don't get me wrong. My husband is wonderful. He never forces me, but I do feel like sometimes I'm not really fully present or saying yes for the right reasons. A lot of times I feel like that's what I'm supposed to do. Sometimes I just don't even feel like hearing his mouth, but I just go along with it. To make matters worse, I've also noticed that pattern of going along to get along showing up in my 6-year-old. We have a very touchy-feely family member, and at Thanksgiving, I could tell that he was not okay with the hugs and the kisses. How do I navigate this for myself, as well as teach my kids to value their own boundaries too? Girlfriend, I need your help. Well, girlfriend, first and foremost, I will work with the baby and then work our way back. You should never force a young person to connect or hug or kiss or have any type of physical interaction with a person if they are not comfortable. It does not matter who that person is. It does not matter what member of the family they are. We begin to instill autonomy and agency in our young people at a very early age. When you let them know that they have the right and say over their own bodies with family members, with doctors and things like that, you begin to set a pattern of autonomy and agency for the future. It is also important when you say, okay, it's okay if you don't want to hug Aunt Gertrude. I know her mustache feels a little scratchy and you don't like that. Affirm their discomfort. Don't make them feel bad. Don't I know sometimes it's easier to just get it done and get it out the way, but you don't want to do that with, particularly not with a young person, because you can see that carrying over, just like you shared, in later in life. It's the same thing with doctor's appointments. In my house, my young people know that they get to consent to different health exams and things like that if they're not comfortable, unless it comes down to it is medically necessary to do that exam. If we are in the hospital for a particular reason, something, regarding their testicles or genitals or something like that, we got to look at it. Okay. I can hold your hand. We can take your time. I can leave the room. I can do as much as I can to set the parameters around what makes you comfortable, but we got to get it done. But just for random reasons, for example, my oldest had something going on and he did not want me to look at it. So I gave him an option. I said, either I look at it and assess it, or we go to urgent care and then they have to do it. And if I look at it and assess it, we may still end up at urgent care depending on what the situation is. And we navigated that conversation, but I wanted to make him feel like he had a choice in the matter. And that's something that I began to instill with them early. We had conversations about consent. I say words like your body, those type of things. And because we can see how that lends itself to conversations later on in life. Also, is important for, once that boundary is set by your young person, you helping them to enforce it with the people as well. So if Aunt Gertrude is like, come on, give me a hug. It's like, Aunt Gertrude, he doesn't want a hug today. And that's okay. And so they see, not only do they hear you saying that they're allowed to have this boundary, but they see you supporting them in that boundary as well. And this also carries over to things like when they're hungry, or if they're not hungry. And we was growing up, we had to sit there and finish our whole plate. But when you teach them, when you force young people to eat, you force young people to hug, you force young people to do certain things, you kind of stop them from listening to their body. And we know as adults what can happen when we don't listen to our bodies. Okay, so that's for the baby. That's what I would do. I honor the fact that you are noticing that early, and he's 6, so it's really you're at a perfect time to begin to shift that conversation. Okay, now as far as you and your husband, what a great question for the conversation that we're having today. What you are describing is compliance sex, and compliance sex is a thing that a lot of Christian wives contend with on the regular. You know what I mean? And it's from this idea that it's your duty, right? We understand what scripture says and that your body is not your own, but none of that sidesteps consent. None of that sidesteps, again, you listening to your body, and none of that sidesteps the expectation that you are a co-owner in the sexual relationship. So I would encourage you to ask yourself, first and foremost, why is it that I am not fully present in the sexual experience? Why is it so difficult for me to offer my yes readily, right? Why do I feel like I'm not enthusiastic about my husband's bids for sexual expression? Is there something between him and I? Is there something internally? Is it because the house is not clean? Is it because I had a hard day with the kids? Notice what takes you out of the mood, and then begin to have that conversation with your husband. Like, hey, here's what I need to be 100% in the moment. When you reach over and start to, rub and smack and clap, here's what I need to make that feel good. Okay. And then if it's nothing to do with him at all, and it's just something internally, then the onus is on you to begin to do the work and have the conversation about creating an environment, creating a culture of sex in your marriage where you are willingly and readily offering a yes. You are beating him to the bedroom before he gets there. Because at the end of the day, the pleasure should be equitable. And I don't know anybody who runs from an orgasm, not one that's given in a healthy relationship, not one that's given with or experienced with a partner who genuinely loves and cares for them. Right? Not one where they don't run from sexual experiences or like kind of just go through the motions with sexual experiences that serve them as well. So let's have that conversation. Let's be real. Like, what is it? What is it? Why don't you like it here? Like we know, like the kids say, I hate it here. Why don't you like it here? Because one thing's for sure, two things for certain. Going along with something is most often a problem, but even more so when we're talking about sex. Sex is never something you should just go along. In the same breath, sex is not something that you should have to convince somebody to do with you, but we'll cross that bridge at a later date. So that's what I would do as for me in my house. I would start today at this very moment and begin to encourage my baby, my 6-year-old, that he has autonomy over his body. That includes teaching him his body parts, teaching him, asking questions about what about this hug with this family member is uncomfortable, really, and in a way that is age appropriate and in a language that he's not going to understand. You don't want to bombard him with all types of words and phrases that he don't get. But ultimately what you're saying is, if you don't want to hug Aunt Gertrude and her scratchy mustache, you ain't got to hug her. And if she says something or makes you feel uncomfortable about telling her no, then you come get me and I will talk to Aunt Gertrude. And then as far as your husband's concerned, as I said, as for me in my house, I would check inside first to see what's going on, what's holding up. Why is my yes hostage? What is holding my yes hostage? Internally, environmentally, or interpersonally. That's most often where there's a disconnect in the enthusiastic sexual expression, right? There's an issue internally, interpersonally, or environmentally in most cases. So check and see what's going on there. Have that conversation with your husband and then revisit it from there. So I hope that answers your question. Well, we do not have a lot of time for this episode, so we're going to jump right on in. This episode is called Consent, Compliant Sex, and Overcoming Sexual Trauma. So I want to start, and I should have started this in the beginning, so I apologize. I want to give a content and trigger warning. We will be talking about, as I said, consent, sex that people may not necessarily want to have, child sex abuse, sexual assault. All of those are themes of today's episode. If that is something that would or could be triggering for you, now is the time to step out and maybe come back. This will be posted later on YouTube. This also you'll be catch the audio of this later on. If you are listening to the audio and at the later recording or the replay of this, welcome. But also, as again, this is your content or trigger warning about this episode. Now, because we are live, I can see your comments, I can see your interactions. So please be sure to let me know what questions you have. I would love to see your comments so that I can interact with you in real time. So let's just jump right on in the first part. What is consent? Consent is such a huge buzzword nowadays. Definitely post Me Too movement. A lot of the things that have been happening in our lives, a lot of the indictments that have been coming down, this idea of sexual coercion, sexual assault, what counts, and all of that, which makes today an even more important discussion for me, given all that's happening in our news cycle. But consent, first and foremost, is your permission or agreement to participate in or experience something or allow or something that is obtained for you to do with or involving another person. Consent could be so as much as permission to borrow something. Consent is, can I have a hug? Consent is, obtaining permission before beginning any type of sexual engagement. Consent is a permission, agreement, obtaining, essentially. And when what we're talking about today, as it relates to sexuality or sex, sexual consent comes with a side of fries. Y'all have likely heard me have this conversation before or describe consent in this way before, but consent is, that it is consent if it has fries. F is freely given. That means voluntarily and without pressure. So we will park with the F so consent is not something that you work at. It's something that you can obtain. It's something that you ask for. It's something that you give. But it's not something, it shouldn't be work. It is freely given. You shouldn't have to wrestle it out of someone. You shouldn't have to present your case to obtain it, right? You ask, you present whatever the situation, which we'll explore some different situations later, and then it is obtained or it is given freely, voluntarily, without pressure or additional coercion or manipulation. That's the F. R, reversible, also known as revocable, which means you can give consent for something and then you can change your mind. You can offer consent for an amount of time and then decide you don't want to participate anymore. You've had enough, so you revoke it, right? It can be withdrawn at any moment, at any point in a relationship, at any point in the sexual encounter, at any point in your sexual history, right? Unfortunately, we live in a world and rape culture where if a person, most often a woman, has a certain sexual resume, this almost as if consent is implied. Consent is not implied, ever, actually. Right? And we'll talk about consent and understood consent and things like that in relationships a little bit later. But for the most part, for a general rule of thumb, to keep everybody from being harmed and keep everybody out of trouble, consent is not implied, right? Next, consent is informed. That means everybody who's in the situation knows what they are agreeing to. We can use, and this could be very simple, like with our young person in the Ask for Me in My House segment. Aunt Gertrude says, "Can I have a hug?" The baby says yes. Aunt Gertrude goes, gives him a hug, tickles him, and then kisses him all over his forehead. That wasn't and then when he's upset, Aunt Gertrude says, "Oh, well, I asked for a hug." "Yeah, but you did 15 other things." Aunt Gertrude, right? Again, I've already given you your trigger warning. Some of this episode also includes my testimony, so I want to worry you. But there was a scenario, a situation that I was in that, amounted to sexual assault, but it was that kind of a just let me put the tip in type of situation. Yeah, we going there today. So prepare your heart and mind. I said, Lord, have thine own way with this episode. Because I want somebody to be free. There's somebody who is watching this that may listen to the things that I'm saying, have a definition of, hear the definition of something and have this realization like, oh, I may have been experienced some type of sexual coercion. I may have experienced some type of sexual assault. I may be guilty of some type of sexual coercion or sexual assault. And I'm here to support you all in any way that I can afterwards. But I know that being able to help other people get freed is being free in my own testimony, because the people are won by what? The word of their what? Oh, okay. Okay. Amen. Anyway, it was like he asked for a certain particular, sexual act that he was just going to do one thing. And I was like, okay, whatever, let's go ahead and get this over with. And it didn't stop there. But because I agreed to just the first part, it was years later when I learned what consent was, when I learned what sexual assault was, where I realized, oh, okay, I wasn't really down with that. Right. And so informed means when you are asking for consent or giving consent, being intentional about what it is that you are going along or what you are agreeing to. What are you requesting permission with? And it's so unfortunate that sometimes we feel like it shouldn't have to take all of that. If I got to do all that, I don't want it. And there's almost this idolatrous approach to spontaneity that we have, that we never want. We don't feel like obtaining consent or giving consent can be sexy. But if you got it like that, if you got the right, je ne sais quoi, consent, obtaining consent, giving consent is very sexy. I mean, because who doesn't like to be asked, can I kiss you here? I would like to feel your beautiful skin. The whispering sweet nothing, that the step by step that you're going to do, and waiting for the agreement, either the verbal or non-verbal language that says, yes, I want this. How is that not sexy? But anyway, that's I. E is enthusiastic. It is an active and genuine agreement. Most cases is an active and genuine yes. Sometimes it is a head nod. For people who communicate in a different manner of ways, whatever communicating agreement, desire, interest looks like for that person is done enthusiastically. And just like the scripture, one scripture doesn't contradict the other, that the Bible can't lie on itself, neither can fries. So not only are we excited about it, but that excitement became freely. That excitement can be taken back once we get into a territory I'm not okay with. Okay. And that excitement is specifically about this thing that we're specifically talking about right here. Okay. That's FRIE. And last but not least, S is specific. Similar to informed. Informed says I know what I'm agreeing to. Specific says I'm agreeing to a particular thing. It applies to a current situation. If I have sex with you tonight, that does not mean if we spend the weekend together, that gives us that you can just have thine own way for the rest of the weekend. Right? I had a client who I'm working with, who I'm walking through a situation where she had willingly, excitedly, all systems go into a sexual experience with a gentleman, but then he took it upon himself the next day to begin to have sex with her that she woke up to, and she was not okay with that. Now, I mentioned that as we slip into our next section on compliance and coercion, because of the idea that consent is implied. There's no such thing as implied consent, because even if you are in a long-standing relationship, in marriage, people think, oh, I don't have to obtain consent anymore because that's my husband, that's my wife, we're going to do the things. But we should be having regular conversations about the things that we enjoy. We should be having regular conversations about the things that bring us excitement in this relationship. We should be having regular conversations about things that we desire to try or participate in, right? And so that consent is given at the moment. For an example, there are some people who I know who have a fantasy or regularly enjoy being woken up sexually by their partners. But that has been a discussion we already agreed upon. I already laid it out as a fantasy of mine. And it is understood between us that that's going to be something that's going to happen in the near future, or this is a way that is already established that I like to be woken up, right? And then if at any point in my life where I decide I don't like to be woken up like that way anymore, or this particular move you use to woke me up, then it'll be my responsibility to say, hey, you could do this, but don't do that. You know, the Ninja Turtle was cool. The motorboat I did not like, right? That's how we get into informed and specific, right? And so it was that particular young lady that I'm working with, she said to me that all this had happened some years ago. And she said to me that all of this time, she kind of felt like something was off. She felt like something was wrong. So me sharing with her, I said, hey, what you're describing is sexual assault. Of course, it was an emotional moment for her. Of course, there was, tears and all the things, and that naturally, but it wasn't as revelatory as one would think, because something in her just didn't feel right. And unfortunately, so many of us are conditioned to sidestep that gut feeling, that feeling in our body when something just doesn't feel right. Your body will tell you things. We are supposed to listen to our body. Our sensations were given to us for a reason. All the things that we've been talking about over the last 5 weeks in this idea of what makes us a sexual being, our body responding to us and giving us, sensations when we are uncomfortable, when we are aroused, all of the part of God's design in his good work and his good hand and his good plan. And so if you go into a situation and your stomach starts to turn Every time you're around this person, you checking for your pocketbook. Every time that one person calls you or sends you a text, your stomach drops to your feet. You pay attention to that. And ultimately, you help your young people start paying attention to that now so that they can grow up to be an adult who learns how to appropriately place their body signals. In the same way, you keep them from becoming hypervigilant. Trauma makes us hypervigilant. Sometimes trauma has cross-wired some of our body signals that we now have to do the work to kind of clear that up and clean that out. Sometimes trauma makes it so that we can't trust what our body is saying because our body's mode is brain mode and self-preservation mode is going to keep us safe. But sometimes it's working to keep us safe when there is no danger. But when you are consistently taught to ignore the signals, when you are consistently taught to avoid leaning into what you feel to be true because of one reason or another, especially in relationships with power dynamics, then you experience a negative experience like a traumatic sexual experience, and now you're all out of whack. And we need to bring it all together. And the first way that we can try to do that, in addition to prayer, is education and episodes like this one. So, as I said, as a recap for consent is freely given, reversible and or revocable. It is informed, it is enthusiastic, and it is specific. Okay, that is consent. Now, let's talk about compliance, coercion, and their impact. This idea that we have of things being wifely duties, particularly for women, or husbandly duties, is what that misappropriation of 1 Corinthians, where it says our body is not our own. That is how we get into compliance sex. That is how we get on to go along to get along sex. That is how we get into the sex, like what I like to call the silly sex. Right now, Mr. was disgusting and he was abusive and all the things, but there are times where he didn't all the time knock her upside her head and force her into the bed, but it is very clear that the sex that they were having, she did not want to have. And there were times where there was flat out rape, flat out assault, but there are times where he was just this life soon be. We said my husband get on top of me and hurt me all over. This life soon be over. Heaven lasts always. And so she went into that experience like, oh, this is just something that I have to do. And I have worked with wives who feel the same way. No, they don't feel like their husband is assaulting them. No, they don't. They would not consider their husband a rapist, nor do I. But they were just complying. There wasn't sex that they always wanted to have. Our young lady in our Ask for Me in My House segment was having sex that they didn't want to have. So compliant sex is sex that you are going along with or agreeing to because you either, one, don't want to argue, two, are afraid of the consequences of the no, three, feel like you have no choice but to say yes, or four, feel like which is similar, this is just what you're supposed to do. And there's no real interest in what is happening, but you're going along because that's what you're supposed to do. That's just what we always do. Right. And so compliance sex doesn't even always have to have like the ache and pain negativity of sexual assault. But if it's a sexual behavior that you just don't like if he keep putting his tongue in your ear, if the oral sex is bad, if she's nicking you with her teeth and you just sitting there, just whatever, that's still compliant sex. And that's not the sex that we are called to have. Sex was given to us as a gift to enjoy equally, equitably, mutually, right? And so unfortunately, anyone, man or woman alike, can experience compliant sex. And I tell wives all the time who, again, are with partners who they love and enjoy and respect, but for whatever reason, their sex life is not where it needs to be, and they just kind of go along with it. And I tell them, nobody wants compliant sex. Even if they go along with it, that's not what they desire. Not a healthy relationship, not a healthy marriage, not a marriage who is willing to create a culture where we are putting an end to the devil's schemes and the devil's attack on on marriages and on families, because the sexually excellent marriage bed wages war against the enemy. I tell y'all that all the time. And so compliant sex doesn't happen when we on the battlefield for our Lord. Amen. When we are trying to give the devil a black eye and get thee behind me, Satan, and Satan, take your hands off of my family, off of my marriage, off of our finances, we get busy in the bed and everybody's orgasming here. This is not like, okay, here you go. You done yet? All right, good night. No, that's not how we fight the devil with that kind of sex. Even if it happens 7 days a week and you don't really want to be there, nobody's happy with that, even if it goes down, because there are orgasms that just wasn't fun. I speak to my brothers all the time and they say that they've had orgasms that wasn't that good. And sometimes we reduce men to, oh, he had an orgasm, so he's fine. No. Right? And so that's part of it. But then there's also the compliance where it's taking away or it's taking a hit at the consent staples that we learn. The compliance that comes after a guilt trip. Come on, man. You tired again? Please, it's not going to take me that long. Real quick. You said that yesterday. Oh my God. Your period on again? Oh, come on, honey. You're not coming to bed. You've been working all day. You still playing the video game? Oh my goodness. And now after that, when the no is given, now you walking around banging cabinets, slamming the door, or you like, okay, you don't want to give me none? And then you reach in your top drawer, rip out your sex toy as a like punishment. And then the sex happens because we want to stop all of that. We want to keep you. If I gotta have sex with you to keep the mood in the house good, that's compliance, right? If I feel like I'm gonna disappoint you because I got a headache, because I pulled a muscle at the gym, right? And keep in mind, this is not gender specific. I'm trying my hardest not to make it gender specific. But a hit dog gonna holler. So wherever it's landing, it's landing. But I'm saying everybody has these experiences where we want what we want. But again, when I talk about bringing the fruit and the spirit into your bedroom, one of the primary ones that works against or fights against this issue of compliance, sex, and coercion is self-control, temperance, right? And so a lot of times we see it when there is a power imbalance, when there's an issue of conflict, and when there's a lot of times when there is a misunderstanding of scripture. A lot of times we see in like evangelical spaces, purity culture spaces, those people who are deeply conservative in their religions feel like they don't get a chance. They can't say no. Right? They feel like they can't say no. And then we also have those relationships where the man has been heralded as the one who makes all the sexual decisions. So wife moves around, always willing, but never really taking co-ownership into the sexual experience. Never really taking co-ownership into the pleasure that is upholding their marriage bed. They're just going along with the flow and really patting themselves on the back because they never tell their husbands no. Yeah, but do you ever ask for a yes? Do you ever go after what you want? While you may never tell him no, do you like it? Is it any good? Okay. So those are some ways that we need to be mindful of how we can come off as coercive in our marriages. If you are, everybody on here is a believer, I presume. And if you had not moved to the place where if you are single and you ain't stopped having sex yet, I will say to you, sex is not anything that you should ever have to convince somebody to do to you, or do with you. Sex is not something that you have to offer back, and you should offer back in exchange for companionship, in exchange for attention, in exchange for kind words, in exchange for the roof being done, in exchange for the doorknobs being changed, in exchange for, now if you are doing this from like, okay, you go pick the kids up from school, out, Okay, but you see the excitement. It's not necessarily a manipulation, but they're like, if you are looking at like you wash the dishes, I'll do the laundry. You go pick up my mom from the airport. I'll give you some. Okay, that's a different conversation because we're all in it and everybody's happy about it and everybody wants to actually participate in what's going on. But if I got to worry about whether you're going to speak to me for 3 days because I said not tonight, now we have a problem. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Okay, so let's talk about some ways in which consent, because where are we? Okay, let's talk about some ways in which consent can be sexy. When you think about, number one, we have to lay away this idolatrous approach. I said this earlier, that we have to, what's the word? Spontaneity, right? Consent can be sexy by adding it into the plan. When you are making your bid for sexual expression and you have something on your mind, tell your partner right then and there what you want to do to them or with them. Text your husband, hey, when I come home later, I'm going to have the kids in bed by 10 o'clock. Can you X, Y, and Z? Can I A, B, and C? If y'all are in the heat of the moment and you kiss one place and you're getting ready to move to another place, once it comes to your mind to say, I'm getting ready to go a little bit lower, that's okay? And if they, we cool. If they lean in or hand it to you, everybody's good. That makes it sexy because now there's this anticipation of what's getting ready to come, but still everybody is on the same page. And that works, and I have found in my experience that works really well, especially with women who have, or partners who have experienced sexual assault and are kind of timid in the bedroom. If you let them know what's going on ahead of time or what your plan is ahead of time, or if you give them to like kind of narrate your moves, then that gives them a chance to also, again, have some ownership, right? Because people have experienced sexual assault, that control was taken from them. And we need to, because assault and rape and sex are two different things. That in the promo for this, I said there's no such thing as non-consensual sex. By definition, that's assault. By definition, that's rape. By definition, that's coercion, right? If it was not freely given, reversible, enthusiastic, informed, and specific, it was assault. And so when we have those moments where we need to separate the sex that was gifted from God from what had happened to us and what happened to our partners. And so giving them a say in what goes on helps to counteract that, right? Next, I wanted to talk about two things. Why no means no. Was really what I just laid out is why should show you how no means no is insufficient. Because of the absence of a no is not consent. And for so long, many of us have been taught that. Many of us have moved based on that. What he or she didn't say no, they must have wanted it. Look at what they had on, they were asking for. All of that upholds the rape culture that we know, and no means no supports that. No, just because they did not say no does not mean that they wanted to be there. Does not mean that they wanted everything to happen. Fight, flight, or freeze, or even fawn is a thing. There have been experiences where you are into something and you're afraid, and so you fawn. It's fight, flight, or freeze are things that you know, but fawn is also an option where now you turn in and turn up because it's like, I need to hurry up and I don't want to upset them. I need this to be over with. So let me play nice so that I can get out of here safely. Right. And so some people say, oh, that's sending mixed signals. It's a trauma response. It's fear. And if we would have led with consent, then we could have avoided these type of moments. Does that make sense? Okay, and so now let's talk about one of the other common things in this consent coercion conversation, especially with young people, good touch, bad touch. That is a very outdated term and also insufficient to prepare young people, because bad touch, to a degree, we can understand, we can agree, it's genitals or a hit or something, or a punch or something like that. But the problem is, there are some bad touches that feel good. Body parts have, nerve endings and receptors and erogenous zones that, rubbing could feel good, even though it's a bad touch, right? And there could be a good touch that, like, if my child is walking across the street or your child is walking across the street and I snatch them because a car is getting ready to come, that hurts. But it was a good touch because it was a safety move, right? And so that gets confusing, good and bad. So now moving toward the language towards safe touch or unsafe touch, or safe touch and uncomfortable touch, helps young people to know, to categorize the touch based on the location where the touch, the motivation of the touch, the person who is doing the touch, the response when they say no. All of those things are a little bit more nuanced and appropriate for everyday life than good touch, bad touch, right? Just like we said, under normal circumstances, a random stranger or a stranger that's not in a part of that child's everyday life, lifting up their testicles and moving around them could be confused as a bad touch if we flat out say all genital touching is a problem. However, this is a safe touch because this is a doctor. They're looking for a specific thing. Your parent is in the room. You have the freedom to stop this. Those type of things, and being more particular about safety and discomfort, which then again lends itself to having a conversation of a young person paying attention to their body's autonomy and agency, as opposed to values judgment of good versus bad. Good and bad can be a little bit more up for discussion, whereas safe and unsafe is clear and to the point, which also lends itself to the importance of talking to your young people, or rather teaching your young people the appropriate and medically accurate names for their body parts, so that they are less likely to experience sexual abuse. Young people who know medically accurate terms are less likely to be victims of child sex abuse, because it is thought by the perpetrator that they have somebody in their life that's going to protect them because they know those names. So using terms like safe touch and unsafe touch, teaching the concept of feelings and feelings being valid for young people at a young age, listening to them, having conversations with them in age appropriate ways. And so last but not least, as we get ready to close, how do we prepare kids for this conversation? And really, I think this will even apply to us adults who may have never had this conversation, right? Either start early or start now. That's number one. Start early or start now. You want to introduce or learn what autonomy is, what agency is, how it is their right, what that looks like. Even begin to give them decisions that they get to freely make without your intervention inside the house, right? They may not have a say over their bedtime, but they may have a say over what pajamas they wear. They may not have a say over if they get in the shower or not, but they may, depending on the schedule, have a say on what time, whether they want a shower or a bath, whether they want regular water or bubble bath. Getting children in the habit of making decisions that fit how they feel in the moment will lend itself for better decision making, or more healthier decision making, and life-giving as decision making in the future. Same way with you. If you've never considered this, I want you to start making decisions that you have the free autonomy to make. If you can change the pillowcase without asking nobody, go and do it. And just get in the habit of exercising your autonomy and agency. You want to use clear language. We're done with the pocketbook. We're done with the wee. We're done with all of those things. Let's call things things. We see in our adulthood the trouble that comes when we don't call things things. So if you are a grown-up, start calling things things. Start naming your hurt. Start naming your body part. Stop speaking in euphemisms, right? Call it what it is. Have that conversation. In that friendship, stop playing games. In that relationship, that situationship, right? Or if you're not ready to end it, which is also cool, address whatever that elephant is in the room, okay? Because what are we doing? What are we doing, right? Call things things. If your feelings are hurt, say that. If somebody asks you how you doing, if you're not okay, don't say that. If you don't want to talk about it, say, I don't want to talk about it right now. I'm not doing the best, but I don't really want to talk about it right now. As opposed to, what's wrong? Nothing. Model calling things for your young people. When your young people speaks in a euphemism or doesn't have the right word, work with them to find it in the moment, right? We want to model the consent, which means even with you right now, I ask my children if I can take their picture. I ask them if I can post their picture. For the most part, I got to get better with that. I ask them before I hug or kiss them. I ask them that. And if I am not in the mood to be hugged or kissed, I will stop my children. My oldest child, he would live in my skin if he could. And he just randomly just comes and want to flop all over me, lay all over me, do all those things. And I have to stop him and say, hey, I'm not in the mood for that right now. I'm touched out. And it took a while for me to get there because I never wanted to hurt his feelings. My mom wasn't super affectionate, and it would hurt my feelings when she would stop me, but it wouldn't have served me for her to just take it all in throughout her discomfort. But I told him, hey, mommy doesn't have any problem with hugging on you and loving you, but you have to ask first. And if I say no in the moment, just know I'll be back later and we can cuddle. But I had to start showing him that I do it, that I exercise that boundary so that he'll be empowered to do the same. And then last but not least, we want to frame this in all of this, the consent, the coercion, all the things, all of the people that we engage with are children of God, image bearers of God. We ourselves are image bearers of God. So anything that you do that hurt, harms, discredits, discourages, disparages, disregards another human being, particularly those that God has placed in your care or in your proximity or family or relationship or marriage, you're doing to an image bearer or a child of God. So when you say, or if you push back against anything I'm saying and said it don't take all of that, that's not necessary, I'm not doing all of that, then what you're saying is you're not willing to do what is necessary to honor an image bearer or a child of God. And you want to make sure that our young people grow up knowing that they are image bearers and children of God, worthy of honor, respect, boundaries, standards, all of those things. We skip and we lay on these expectations on them on how to live the life for Christ. But living in consent, obtaining and providing consent should be in that conversation as well. Because then they don't grow up to be people that guilt trip their spouses into having sex. They don't grow up to be people who have sex just to keep peace in the house. They don't grow up to be people who experience some type of sexual trauma but don't report it to anybody because they don't want to get the person in trouble. Right? So I want you, if this, as I said in the beginning, this may have brought up some stuff for a lot of people. I kind of put this off for a little bit because of the stuff it brought up for me. But it was in that session I had with my client where I had to walk her through the realization that she had experienced sexual assault when she woke up and that young man was on top of her without her permission, without her consent. And she didn't know that she could revoke that consent or that consent was specific to the night before. I did not know when I experienced my sexual assault that it was, even though I agreed to one part of it, that was not giving him carte blanche to continue with the rest. I think about other experiences in my life where I just went along just for the sake of keeping the peace. And I don't want that for anybody else. I don't want husbands and wives to be going through compliant sex just for the sake of keeping peace. I don't want husbands or wives to not feel like co-owners in an equally and mutually pleasurable, gifted sexual experience. I don't want the enemy to have a stronghold on anybody as it relates to sexual trauma. I want us to be able to listen to these moments and use the education as well as our access to the prayer, to the throne of grace, lay it before him and allow him to heal it, clean it up, and restore us so that we can walk ahead fully healed, knowing that we are not damaged, you are not dirty, you are not any of the negative things, any of the lies that the enemy will play in the heads of people who have experienced sexual assault, and even those who may have been guilty of it in your past. If you have repented, turn from your wicked ways, his word says he will hear from heaven and he will heal the land. So if you have experienced sexual assault, if you are a perpetrator of sexual assault or sexual coercion or anything, any of those things, it does not always have to be like this. There is freedom available to us all if we seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. All of the things will be added unto him. For those who are going through right now, even who may have had a recent experience, God is close to the brokenhearted and near to those who are crushed in spirit. So if you are watching this and stuff has come up for you and you are looking for a professional to be able to walk through this healing journey with you, please send me an email to admin@theintimacyfirm.com. I will send you a link so that you can get on my calendar. We can talk about if I am a good fit to walk through this with you. If you have any prayer requests, send me an email, admin@theintimacyfirm.com, or you can put it down in the comments below. Share this with someone if it has been a blessing for you. Please like, share, and subscribe. Catch up on the other episodes that we have. This is episode 11, and next Tuesday will be our season 1 finale. Oh my God, I cannot believe that we have gone through. It'll be 12 episodes next week. October 1st, we started this, and we here. And so next week will be the season finale. And then we will take a short break, couple weeks break, and we will be back season 2 in February. Season 2 will be bringing on guests. Season 2 we're gonna have surprises, giveaways, more sponsored type of content, like all the things. Our live community is gonna be jumping off by the time season 2 comes. So just make sure you are staying in touch with us. Like I said, like, comment, share, subscribe if this was a blessing to you. Again, email me, admin@theintimacyfirm.com. If you need prayer requests, if you want to work with me to help you through this traumatic experiences, I'm here. As always, it's Brittany Broaddus-Smith, the #1 Christian sexologist and your favorite girlfriend. Bye. Now how do I do this here? Hold on, y'all. Oh, there we go. Bye.